Good afternoon, class 6. I, Shruti Srivastav, welcome you to the social science class. Before we proceed with the portion which we have left from chapter 2, that was from hunting, gathering to growing food, we will do a quick recap of what we have studied in the previous class. We have studied why people were moving from one place to other. They led a life of a hunter-gatherer. Hunter were the people who hunted wild animals. Gatherer we call them because they gathered the fruits, the nuts, the eggs, etc. Whatever they could get, they gathered them for their survival. This is the way they got their food. Then that why we were talking about why they had to move from one place to another, because there are four different reasons. First of all, they had utilized the resources which were available at one place, so they had to move to other place for their survival. Second, the animals whom they hunted, they also moved from one place to another in search of their prey. Plants which were bearing the fruits on which the human beings were dependent, they were seasonal. Sometimes you can relate it, understand it the way that you cannot get mangoes in the winter season because it's a seasonal fruit, you get it in the summers. Same ways, they were dependent on the seasonal fruits, so they had to move from one place to other. And last but not the least, the most important thing was the water. They were dependent on water, and there were water resources which were seasonal, perennial and seasonal. So if they were perennial, they could get it all the year round, but if they were seasonal, then the rivers or the streams, they dried up after some time. So they had to move from one place to other for their survival. Then we had talked about the tools which they used for hunting the animals. They made the tools from different things. Three things which they used were stone, bone and wood. We have studied about the different sites from where we have got these tools. There were Bhimbetka and Kurnool caves. We have got the proofs of the rock paintings from these sites. So today, now this much we have studied in the last lecture. Now from here we will be proceeding with the second chapter, the last portion. The beginning of farming and herding. This was also a time when several grain-bearing grasses, including wheat, barley and rice, grew naturally in different parts of the subcontinent. Men, women and children probably collected these grains as food and learned where they grew and when they ripened. This may have led them to think about growing plants on their own. In this way, people became farmers. So this was the time, we can say that gradually people, when they started living, there were different types of grasses. Like somewhere they might have found wheat or barley growing naturally in different areas. They observed that in particular season they are growing, how they are ripening, and this led them to think about growing these plants on their own. People could also attract and then tame animals by leaving food for them near their shelters. The first animal to be tamed was the wild ancestor of the dog. Later, people encouraged animals that were relatively gentle to come near the camps where they lived. These animals, such as sheep, goat, cattle, and also the pig, lived in herds, and most of them ate grass. Often, people protected these animals from attacks by other wild animals. This is how they became herders. So what they did was, they began to tame animals, that is, train animals the way we do to our pet animals. Sometimes you must have noticed, if you have a pet dog or if you have visited somebody who has a pet dog, that they throw the ball and they ask the dog to go and pick it up, and the dog does it. Sometimes they ask the dog to come near and sit near to them. They follow the instructions. That means they have tamed those dogs. You cannot ask a street dog to come and sit near you, and it will not do it as well. So the taming began. That is the training. What they started doing, they might have kept some food items outside their caves, those or their homes, and those animals came for the food, like the way we do. If you keep some food outside your house for the street animals, 1 day or 2 days, and then gradually you will see that every day they start coming. So this was the way which might have given them the idea of taming the animals. They tame different kinds of animals like goat, cattle, sheep, etc. But the first one was ancestor of dog. Why do you think that? Here's a question. Can you think of any reason why the dog was perhaps the first animal to be tamed? Think, and we will talk about it. Domestication is the name given to the process in which people grow plants and look after animals. Very often, plants and animals that are tended by people become different from wild plants and animals. This is because people select plants and animals for domestication. For example, they select those plants and animals that are not prone to disease. They also select plants that yield large size grain and have strong stalks capable of bearing the weight of ripe grain. Seeds from selected plants are preserved and sown to ensure that new plants and seeds will have same qualities. Amongst animals, those that are relatively gentle are selected for breeding. As a result, gradually, domesticated animals and plants became different from wild animals and plants. For example, the teeth and horns of wild animals are usually much larger than those of domesticated animals. So, when the domestication, that is keeping animals as pets and taming them, begin, then there was a time that people started growing plants, looking after the animals. Both the things they were doing simultaneously. Then they noticed that some plants have better quality of grains, so they started preserving the seeds of those plants and growing those seeds next year with the hope that they will have the same quality which the initial grains of the initial plant had. Okay, then you might have noticed that the plants which are same plant, if you keep it, like for example, if you talk about a pet dog which you keep at home and a street dog, there is a lot of difference, although the animal is same ways the plants also differ. Plants which were grown or which are grown by human beings and which are grown on their own in the wild, they are totally and completely different. Okay, look at sorry Look at these two sets of teeth which you can see in the picture. Which do you think belongs to a wild pig and which to a domesticated one? Domestication was a gradual process that took place in many parts of the world. It began about 12,000 years ago. Virtually all the plants and animals produced that we use as food today is a result of domestication. Some of the earliest plants to be domesticated were wheat and barley. The earliest domesticated animals include sheep and goat. So, domestication was a gradual process. Obviously, it didn't happen in 1 day or 2 days. It took time. So, we can hear, they are telling us that initially wheat which they started domesticating, or plant which they started growing, was wheat and barley, and the animal which they domesticated were sheep and goat. A new way of life. If you plant a seed, you will notice that it takes some time to grow. This may be for several days, weeks, months, and some cases years. When people began growing plants, it meant that they had to stay in the same place for a long time, looking after the plants, watering, weeding, driving away animals and birds till the grain ripened. And then the grain had to be used carefully. So this, what they did was, like when they started growing the seeds, like they had to stay there to take care of the plant to grow up, to keep it safe from the animals. They have, like, if you have a garden at home, you must have seen that from time to time you have to clear the weeds, that is the plant which grow in the flower pot or in the like garden, which are not grown by your parents. They are, they have to be removed. The reason is because whatever fertilizers or has been used to improve the quality, that will be used by that weed as well. So the weeds had to be cleared. So they also cleared the weeds and stay there for some time, till the time that grain or that crop had ripened. As grain had to be stored for both food and seed, people had to think of ways of storing it. In many areas, they began making large clay pots or wove baskets or dug pits into the ground. Do you think hunter gatherers would have made and used pots? Give reasons for your answer. So, obviously, when they started growing crops, they realized that it was more than they needed. So, it has to be stored, it has to be kept safely. So that gave them the idea of making pots, and they began making large clay pots. Some of them made those woven baskets, and some got the idea, and what they did was they dug the ground, and the pits, in the pits they saved those food items. Then storing animals. Animals multiply naturally. Besides, if they are looked after carefully, they provide milk, which is an important source of food, and meat whenever required. In other words, animals that are reared can be used as a store of food. Okay, so why storing animals? Now you'll get the answer to this question, that they looked after these animals carefully, that is properly, because they provided them the milk, they provided them meat, they provided with them with the eggs, and sometimes they were reared and can be stored as store of food. What do you mean by store of food? Yes, keep guessing. Okay, yes, you are right. Store of food, that means they can rear those animals, and by rearing, the number can be increased, and at times they can kill those animals for the purpose of eating if they do not have food to eat. Fine. Finding out about the first farmers and herders. Turn to map 2, page 13. You will notice a number of blue squares. Each marks a site from where archaeologists have found evidence of early farmers and herders. These are found all over the subcontinent. Some of the most important ones are in northwest, in present day Kashmir, and in east and south India. To find out whether these sites were settlements of farmers and herders, scientists study evidence of plants and animal bones. One of the most exciting finds include remains of burnt grain. These may have been burnt accidentally or on purpose. Scientists can identify these grains, and so we know that a number of crops were grown in different parts of the subcontinent. They can also identify the bone of different animals. So, when you are looking at that map, which is on page 13, you can see that there are places like Koldebaha, Chirand, Burzahom. Burzahom is in Kashmir, Mehergarh. These are in squares. So, what the scientists did was they studied the evidence, like the plants, the animal bones, whatever they have found there. They have studied those things, the pots, which these people might have been using. At one place, they have found that they have burnt the grains, some leftovers of it. So it could have been accidentally burnt, or intentionally they have burnt it for purpose of storing it, or for the purpose of making something. So these things have helped these archaeologists to study and understand the way these people might have been living towards a settled life. Archaeologists have found traces of huts or houses at some sites. For instance, in Burzahom, in present day Kashmir, people built pit houses, which were dug into the ground with steps leading into them. These may have provided shelter in cold weather. Archaeologists have also found cooking hearths but inside and outside the huts, which suggests that depending on the weather, people could cook food either indoors or outdoors. So in Burzahom, they have found that the people were living in pit houses that they dug the ground, which had stairs, and they went down and lived there. Maybe these pit houses, saved them from the cold weather which was outside. Then they have noticed that some utensils, some pots were kept outside the house, outside the house, these huts, and some of them were indoors. This suggests that depending on the weather, they might have been cooking. If it was cold, they cooked inside. If it was hot, preferred cooking outside. Stone tools have been found from many sites as well. Many of these are different from the earlier Paleolithic tools, and that is why they are called Neolithic. These include tools that were polished to give fine cutting edge, and mortars and pestle used for grinding grain and other plant produce. Mortars and pestle are used for grinding grain even today, several thousand years later. At the same time, tools of Paleolithic type continued to be made and used, and remember, some tools were made of bone. I'll give you the picture of mortar and pestle and you can recognize it. These are used till date by people in our house. We also have it in our houses nowadays even. So this is used for grinding the grains. Nowadays we have mixer grinders as well, but still there are people who prefer to using there's mortar and pestle for grinding. Then there were some stone tools which were found, and they were different from the tools which were used in the Paleolithic age, so they called it the tools of Neolithic age. Many kinds of earthen pots have also been found. These were sometimes decorated and were used for storing things. People began using pots for cooking food, especially grains like rice, wheat, and lentils, that now became an important part of the diet. Besides, they began weaving cloth using different kinds of material, for example, cotton, that could now be grown. Did things change everywhere and all at once? Not quite. In many areas, men and women still continued to hunt and gather food. And elsewhere, people adopted farming and herding slowly over several thousand years. Besides, in some cases, people tried to combine these activities, doing different things during different seasons. So, people gradually started weaving cloth. They used different kinds of material, like cotton was grown for making clothes. Then at different places, they had different way of living. Some places, men and women, they continued to hunt and gather the way we have studied. Somewhere people have adopted farming and herding, that is keeping animals, rearing them. And there were some places where they were following both the lifestyles, that is that of a hunter and gatherer, as well as they grew crops for their survival. A closer look, living and dying in Mehergarh. Find Mehergarh on map 2. This site is located in a fertile plain near the Bolan Pass, which is one of the most important routes into Iran. Mehergarh was probably one of the places where people learned to grow barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for the first time in this area. It is one of the earliest villages that we know about. At this site, many animal bones were found. Bones of wild animals such as the deer and pig, and also bones of sheep and goat were found. So the Mehergarh, this was a place in Iran. You can see it in the map where we have located, we have just noticed few places. And here for the first time these archaeologists have got the proof that they grew barley and wheat, they reared sheep and goat, and in here people started living in a form of villages, like where many people lived together. So we come to know about this site through the evidence. They got many the archaeologists have got many bones of the animals, animal like for the case of wild animal they had the bones of deer and pig, and bones of sheep and goat have also been found. Other finds at Mehergarh include remains of square or rectangular houses. Each house had 4 or more compartments, some of which may have been used for storage. When people die, their relatives and friends generally pay respect to them. People look after them, perhaps in the belief that there is some form of life after death. Burial is one such arrangement. Several burial sites have been found at Mehergarh. In one instance, the dead person was buried with goats, which were probably meant to serve as food in the next world. So people started living in like in the way they are living in villages. So in the burial, they felt that there is, or they had a belief that once a person dies, there is a life after that as well. So they kept like a few goats along with the body in the hope that those goats are going to help that person in the life which he is going to lead after death. Elsewhere, cave paintings in France. Find France in your atlas. The painting below is from a cave in France. This site was discovered by 4 school children more than 100 years ago. Paintings like this were made between 20,000 and 10,000 years ago. Many of these were of animals such as wild horses, aurochs, an older wild form of cattle, bison, woolly rhinoceros, reindeer, and bear, painted in the bright colors. These colors were made from minerals like ochre or iron ore and charcoal. It is possible that these paintings were done on ceremonial occasions, or perhaps they were made for special rituals performed by hunters before they went in search of prey. Can you think of any other reason? So here they are trying to tell us that cave paintings which we have talked about before were not only in India, they were made even in France, and few school children have noticed these paintings, and they have noticed that the painting had different colors. So they used the minerals for coloring, that is iron ore and charcoal. They have different animals drawn on the caves. Elsewhere, a Neolithic site. Find Turkey in your atlas, one of the most famous Neolithic sites. Ketelhuyuk was found in Turkey. Several things were brought from great distances: flint from Syria, cowries from the Red Sea, shells from Mediterranean Sea, and used in settlement. Remember, there were no carts. Most things would have been carried on the backs of packs, animals such as cattle or people. What do you think cowries and shells would have been used for? So you have to jog your brain and tell me that why do you think that cowries and shells were used? Yes, you are correct. They were the medium of exchanging things, the barter system which was there, because there was no money as such in that era. So they took these shells and cowries for exchanging things. People used to give these and got whatever things they want in exchange for it. Okay, I'll be sending you the few images when you can see the answers of the questions along with that, and that will make you understand the chapter more easily. So here we come to the end of the chapter. I hope the video is clear to all of you. Please do all the questions. Thank you. Be safe at home. Take care of yourselves.